In this intense story, Alex inherits his family farm only to discover that Karen, the ruthless Hoa president, has been illegally using his land for overflow parking. After multiple confrontations and underhanded tactics, Alex uncovers shocking truths about Karen's attempts to steal his land and control the community's water supply. With the help of his neighbors, Alex exposes Karen's fraud, leading to a public showdown at the Hoa meeting where Karen's deceit is revealed, and justice is served. If you're enjoying these kinds of stories, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. It really motivates me to keep creating content like this. Now, let's dive into the full story. Alex had just inherited the family farm, a sprawling piece of land that had been in his family for generations. He was eager to return to his roots, restoring the old farmhouse and turning the fields back into productive crops. However, his excitement quickly turned into frustration when he arrived at the property one Saturday morning. As he drove down the long gravel driveway, something seemed off. There were dozens of cars parked across the land, blocking access to the barn and spreading across the open field where his cattle usually roamed. Some vehicles were parked near the house, others near the woods, and several lined up near the old silo. The sight was jarring. Alex parked his truck by the farmhouse and stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel. The land he had hoped to nurture and call his own was being used as a makeshift parking lot. His stomach churned with disbelief. He knew this wasn't right. He stormed toward the group of cars. But before he could get too far, he saw her, Karen, the president of the local homeowners association, HOA. She was standing with her arms crossed near the group of parked cars, overseeing the scene as though it was completely normal. "Karen?" Alex called out, his voice sharp. "What's going on here? Why are all these cars parked on my land?" Karen turned slowly, a smug smile spreading across her face. "Oh, Alex," she said, as if this were some minor misunderstanding. "We've had an arrangement with the previous owner. The neighborhood needed extra parking space, and your property was always used for that." Alex's jaw tightened. "There was no agreement with me," he snapped. "And I sure didn't approve of this." It wasn't long after Alex discovered the illegal parking lot that he witnessed something even worse. As he walked past the tractor shed, he saw a large, beat-up truck slowly driving over a section of his crops. The tires churned through rows of freshly planted vegetables, crushing his hard work into the dirt. His heart pounded in his chest as he rushed forward, shouting at the driver to stop. But the truck kept moving, oblivious to the damage being done. "Hey! What do you think you're doing?" Alex yelled, his fists clenched in anger. The truck finally came to a halt, and the driver, a burly man in a faded work shirt, gave Alex a confused look before backing up, clearly unsure of what to do. Alex didn't waste a second. He marched up to the driver and pointed toward the damage. "This is my land. You're destroying my crops." The driver mumbled something about not being aware and quickly got out of the truck. Alex's focus shifted. And there, walking towards him with a confident stride, was Karen, flanked by none other than Jeffrey, a slick lawyer, who always seemed to be by her side. "Alex, calm down," Karen said coolly, her tone dismissive. "We've already explained, this land has been used for overflow parking. There's nothing to be upset about." Alex wasn't having it. He stood his ground, feeling his blood boil. "No. You can't just park on my land without my permission. Look at what your people have done to my crops." This stops now, Karen? Never one to back down. Shot him a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You're making a scene. All you need to do is sign this agreement. And everything will be sorted. It's a simple deal. Really, she said, handing him a piece of paper. Jeffrey, standing just behind her, added with a slick grin. It's in your best interest. Alex. You wouldn't want to go down the legal route. Would you? It could cost you far more than agreeing to a small arrangement. Alex felt a rush of frustration. This wasn't just about parking, it was about his land. His family's legacy. He took a step back, staring Karen down. I don't care what kind of arrangement you think you had with the previous owner. I'm not signing anything. I want every single car off my land by tomorrow morning. Or I'll take legal action. The tension in the air was palpable as Alex's threat hung heavy between them. Karen and Jeffrey exchanged a quick look. But Alex stood firm, refusing to be intimidated any longer. I'm done negotiating, Alex said, his voice low and steady. If you don't remove those cars, I'll make sure you regret it. Days passed, and the tension between Alex and Karen reached a breaking point. Karen had ignored his ultimatum, and the cars continued to park on his land, untouched and unmoved. But Alex wasn't going to back down. He had to find a way to make his stand count. He knew the Hoa would be unwilling to back off unless he had something powerful in his corner. That evening, while sifting through some old documents his grandfather had left behind, Alex came across a property deed that caught his eye. Among the papers, there was a map of the entire community, showing the layout of the farms and homes, including the water access points. His fingers froze over the brittle page as he traced the lines with his eyes. His farm was the key. Alex had always known that his property bordered the community's water source. But what he hadn't realized was that the entire neighborhood depended on his land for access to the water supply. The main pipeline that supplied water to the entire Hoa passed through the corner of his farm. And the only viable entrance to maintain and repair it was through his property. Suddenly, Alex's mind raced. This piece of knowledge was exactly what he needed to tip the scales in his favor. If he denied them access to the water, the Hoa would face significant disruptions that no one could afford, especially in the middle of the hot summer months. The next morning, Alex wasted no time. He marched straight to Karen's office at the Hoa headquarters, documents in hand. He found her talking with Jeffrey, her ever-present attorney. The moment Karen saw Alex, her face hardened, and she quickly dismissed Jeffrey with a quick wave. What now, Alex? Karen asked, her voice dripping with impatience. Alex took a deep breath and slammed the map and deed down on the table between them. I've got something that'll make you reconsider your little parking scheme, he said, watching Karen's eyes narrow as she glanced at the documents. Did you know that your entire Hoa relies on my land for water access? The pipeline that serves every house in this community runs right through my property. And the only access point for repairs and maintenance is through my farm. Karen's face went pale as the implications settled in. She opened her mouth to speak but found no words. Alex leaned in, his tone firm. If you want to keep your water flowing, you'll have to play by my rules. I want every car off my land by the end of the day, or I'll have no choice but to block your access to the water. Jeffrey, who had been hovering in the background, stepped forward, clearly startled. You can't seriously think you can control the water supply. There are legal consequences. Alex cut him off. I'm not threatening to turn off the water. But I'm fully within my rights to deny access if this trespassing doesn't stop immediately. I have all the documentation to back it up. You want to test me? Go ahead. Karen's confident facade cracked as she realized the position Alex had just put her in. With the entire community's water supply now at stake, Alex had the upper hand. And he wasn't going to let go. The ball was in her court now. Either she removed the cars, or the Hoa would face far more serious consequences than a parking dispute. Even after Alex had presented his trump card, the water access, Karen refused to back down. Her stubbornness was relentless. And she was unwilling to let a newcomer like Alex dictate the terms of the HOA's control over the neighborhood. It was clear to Alex that Karen wasn't just going to accept a defeat, she was going to fight dirty. One morning, a letter arrived at Alex's farmhouse, stamped with the HOA's official seal. At first glance, it appeared to be a typical communication. But as he read through the contents, Alex's blood ran cold. The letter claimed that his land was now considered part of the HOA's common property and was subject to their guidelines, meaning Karen had effectively written off his ownership rights, along with his ability to control access to the water supply. The letter cited a newly discovered agreement with the previous landowner, saying that the property had been transferred to the Hoa under some obscure clause. Alex's stomach twisted in disbelief. He hadn't signed any such agreement. Nor had his family ever agreed to any terms that would allow the Hoa to claim ownership of his land. This was nothing but a bold-faced lie. Furious, Alex took the letter to his neighbor, Frank, who had lived on the farm next door for decades. Frank had seen the original deeds when Alex's grandfather had passed them down to him. And he knew the history of the land like the back of his hand. After a brief look, Frank's face hardened. This is a complete forgery, Alex. No way this land was ever transferred to the Hoa. Karen's trying to pull a fast one on you. With Frank's help, Alex set out to prove the document was fake. They compared the forged letter with the official records. And it became clear that Karen had altered the deed in several key areas, mismatched signatures, altered dates, and even a forged notary stamp. Alex now had the evidence he needed to expose Karen for the fraud she was. Armed with this knowledge, Alex prepared for a confrontation at the upcoming Hoa meeting. Word had spread through the neighborhood that the meeting would be the final showdown. And Alex wasn't going to let Karen get away with her underhanded tactics. He drafted a speech, carefully outlining the forged documents and Karen's attempts to illegally seize his land. With Frank by his side, Alex knew they could expose her to the entire neighborhood. On the day of the meeting, the room was packed with Hoa members, many of whom had been swayed by Karen's charm and manipulation. As Alex stepped up to the front of the room, he could feel the eyes of the entire community on him. Karen sat at the front, a smug smile playing on her lips. But her confidence faltered as Alex calmly laid out his evidence. With a steady hand, Alex presented the forged documents to the group. "This is what Karen has been using to try to steal my land," he said, his voice strong and unwavering. "These signatures are fake. And the notary is a fraud. This land has never belonged to the Hoa. And I'm not going to let her walk all over me, or this community, any longer." The room was silent, the weight of Alex's words sinking in. Karen's face turned a deep shade of red, her smile fading as the truth came to light. Alex's voice rang out, challenging Karen's grip on the Hoa. "I'm not just fighting for my property, I'm fighting for the integrity of this community. No one here should be afraid of Karen or her manipulations." The showdown had begun. And Alex wasn't about to back down now. The atmosphere at the Hoa meeting was thick with tension. The large conference room was filled with murmurs as Karen sat at the front. Her usual air of confidence now replaced with an uneasy unease. Alex, standing tall with a stack of documents in his hands, could feel the eyes of the entire neighborhood on him. His heart pounded in his chest. But he wasn't backing down, not this time. With Frank by his side, Alex strode up to the front and set the documents down on the table. He locked eyes with Karen, who was now visibly sweating under the pressure. Alex began, his voice calm but firm. What you see here are the forged documents Karen has been using to try to steal my property. These papers are full of fake signatures and altered dates. This land was never, and will never be, part of the Hoa. The room fell silent as Alex placed the documents in front of the board members. As he spoke, he flashed a series of emails across the projector screen behind him. They were emails between Karen and her legal team, including Jeffrey, detailing the HOA's secret plan to annex Alex's farm for parking and development. The emails were clear. Karen had been scheming behind Alex's back for months, hoping to seize control of the land by any means necessary. This was never about parking, Alex continued, his voice growing stronger. This was about her greed and desire to expand the HOA's reach, using any underhanded tactic she could think of. But the truth is, I'm not the only one she's been controlling. This is about power. And it ends now. Karen's face flushed a deep red. But she tried to play it off, raising her hand dismissively. This is all nonsense. You have no right to disrupt the peace of this community. You don't even know how we work here. But Alex wasn't finished. And here's the final piece of the puzzle, he said, tapping the last document on the table. This is the truth about the water supply. The entire neighborhood depends on my land for access to the main pipeline. Without it, your homes would have no water. The realization hit the room like a thunderclap. Karen's attempt to bully Alex into submission had failed miserably. Her carefully constructed web of lies was now unraveling in front of everyone. But as Alex spoke, Karen's anger reached a boiling point. She stood up abruptly, her face twisted in rage, and stormed out of the room. You think you've won? You haven't seen the last of me, she shouted as she left, a desperate edge in her voice. But Alex wasn't finished. He had one last move to make. While the board members and residents sat in stunned silence, Alex pulled out his phone and called the police. Karen's trying to turn off the water supply. She's threatening to cut us off unless we back down. Minutes later, the sound of sirens filled the air as local law enforcement arrived at the meeting. Within moments, officers confronted Karen and Jeffrey, who had attempted to disable the water access point in retaliation. The police moved quickly, arresting both of them for attempted vandalism and conspiracy to disrupt public utilities. With the help of the media, the truth about Karen's illegal actions spread like wildfire. News outlets reported on the fraud, the forged documents, and Karen's attempts to intimidate and manipulate the community. The once powerful Hoa president was now facing criminal charges, and the people who had once feared her began to speak up. In the aftermath of the chaos, Alex's land was officially recognized as his, with no further claims from the Hoa. The parking lot that Karen had tried to impose on his property was dismantled, and the community started to regain its sense of unity. People began to support Alex, grateful for his bravery in standing up against corruption. Neighbors who had once been intimidated by Karen now saw Alex as a leader, a man who had fought for the integrity of his land and his community. The change in the neighborhood was palpable. For the first time in years, the residents were hopeful. They knew that with Alex at the forefront, things were finally going to get better. The shadow of Karen's reign had been lifted, and the community could finally begin to rebuild. United by the truth and a sense of justice that had long been missing, Alex smiled as he looked out over his farm. The fields now quiet and undisturbed. He had won. Not just for himself, but for everyone who had been oppressed by Karen's manipulation. It was a new day in the neighborhood, one where honesty and fairness would guide the way forward. I'd love to hear what you think about this story. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Did you think Alex did the right thing? If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps me create even more exciting content like this. Stay tuned for more stories coming your way.